Kale shuffled down the crowded concourse of Vera Prime, his boots clanging against the metal grating, and cursed softly under his breath at the anti-grav boots he'd been issued last week. The thing had a mind of its own, occasionally floating him half a meter above the floor, then slamming him down like a sack of wet laundry, which was, frankly, humiliating in front of the daily throng of interstellar commuters and merchants. Today, of course, it was raining inside the station. Artificial rain, a weather simulation gone slightly rogue, and Kale's coat had already soaked through, sticking to his back like an overambitious adhesive. He muttered something about cosmic justice and stepped over a puddle of neon blue coolant, narrowly avoiding a collision with a hovering delivery drone that beeped indignantly as he stumbled past. As he righted himself, cursing the laws of physics and his bad luck in equal measure, Kale noticed her. She was leaning against the wall of a corridor, tall and elegant, with the kind of posture that made passers-by either avert their eyes or gawk like they'd stumbled into a museum exhibit. Her hair was a deep, iridescent black that shimmered under the artificial lights, but it was her ears that first caught Kale's attention, long, tapered, and curved in a way that seemed almost musical, catching stray beams of light as though they were absorbing attention rather than deflecting it. She didn't look alien in the grotesque way the Holovids usually depicted them, with tentacles or translucent skin, but different enough that Kale's brain immediately labeled her as probably not human. Before he could formulate a plan to avoid staring outright, a trio of scavengers, half human, half modified with cybernetic limbs and glowering enough to make Kale's knees go soft, approached her. They were laughing with the sort of cruelty reserved for beings who had little else to amuse themselves, and their leader stepped forward, reaching for her cloak with one clawed hand. Kale felt a sudden, uncharacteristic surge of bravery, or perhaps it was pure panic at witnessing someone's dignity being threatened, and without thinking, he stepped forward. He tripped over a loose floor panel and smacked his shoulder against the corner of a nearby crate. The scavenger's leader yelped, apparently startled by the human projectile that had suddenly collided with his leg. Kale scrambled up, feet flailing, knocking over the other two in a spectacular heap of limbs and cybernetics. The corridor erupted in a chorus of beeps, bangs, and the human equivalent of facepalms. Kale, now sitting on the floor with one boot spinning slowly in midair thanks to the anti-grav malfunctions, looked up at the alien woman, expecting a scolding or perhaps a death glare. Instead, she was smirking, her ears flicking in amusement. "You humans really do have a talent for clumsy heroics," she said, her voice light, teasing. "Most would have stayed out of trouble. You almost made it interesting." Kale felt a hot blush spread across his face. Yeah, well, I tripped. Very heroic, very planned," he muttered. She laughed, a sound that seemed to tangle with the hum of the station's energy grid in a way that made Kale's ears ring, and he realized he'd been staring a bit too much. He quickly looked down at his own boots, embarrassed to find one still spinning gently above the floor as if mocking him. She introduced herself as Lysera, a wandering envoy from a distant spiral arm called Etherian. Kale blinked. "Etha, what now?" he asked, mentally preparing a joke about long-distance travel and interstellar Uber, but she didn't pause. Instead, she stepped closer, ears twitching slightly as though assessing him, a faint smile still playing at her lips. "Etherian," she repeated, "and you have saved me of sorts, which is rare. Most humans either ignore us or panic dramatically." Kale coughed. "Well, I am very dramatic, yes. Professionally," he said, earning another amused flick of her ears. He realized it was a good thing she found him funny, because his usual charm was the kind that failed spectacularly, like a solar flare striking a tin can. They began to walk together, Kale's coat flapping wetly against his back as she navigated the station with effortless grace, her boots silent despite the chaos around them. He attempted small talk, offering awkward commentary on everything from the absurd station advertisements that promised instant happiness pods to the weirdly specific gravity anomalies that had caused him to fall twice already that morning. Lysera made jokes back, subtle jabs at human habits that Kale had never noticed before. Why humans insisted on standing in slow-moving hover lanes, why they consumed caffeine with so much ritualistic reverence, why they always tried to organize things that were clearly meant to defy order. Her humor was dry, teasing, and somehow cosmic in scope, and Kale felt himself relaxing despite the lingering embarrassment of his impromptu heroics. Their laughter echoed through the neon corridors, a small rebellion against the usual grinding noise of the orbital station. Occasionally, Lysera would flick her ears, tapping into some unspoken rhythm that made Kale's internal compass spin with curiosity. She hinted at abilities humans might only dream of, casual manipulations of probability that made her presence both comforting and unnervingly powerful. Kale's brain tried to keep up, juggling the alien explanations with thoughts of the puddle of blue coolant he had left behind, and the increasingly obvious fact that his ordinary life was beginning to unravel around her. At one point, as they passed a gravity shaft that made Kale momentarily weightless, he stumbled mid-step, flailing dramatically while Lysera barely twitched, catching him by the arm with a teasing smile. "Perhaps you humans are more entertaining when you're flying helplessly," she said, and Kale, dangling upside down for a second longer than he cared to admit, quipped, "I'll take that as a compliment to my aerial form." She laughed again, long and musical, and for a fleeting moment, Kale felt like the universe had shifted, favoring him in a tiny, improbable way. By the time they reached the station's observation deck, overlooking the glittering void of space dotted with cargo haulers, mining freighters, and the occasional passing comet, Kale realized he hadn't asked the obvious questions yet. Why she was here, why she was alone, and why he, of all humans, had been lucky or unlucky enough to intervene. Lysera, sensing his curiosity, tilted her head, ears flicking thoughtfully. "You wonder why, don't you? Why a human of no particular note, living a life of minor inconveniences, would catch my attention?" Kale nodded. "I do, and I expect a very entertaining answer." She smirked, her eyes reflecting distant stars. "Perhaps it is simply that in a universe of billions, I have rarely encountered one who acts with honesty rather than fear. You, Kale, have done so, and that, my very ordinary human, is unusual." Kale felt his stomach twist in a combination of pride, confusion, and cosmic awe. He wanted to make a joke, something about alien standards for heroism being way too high, but all that came out was a nervous chuckle. Lysera's smile widened, and she gestured at the expanse of space beyond the deck. "There is more to see than this station, more to learn, and perhaps more to stumble into," she added, ears flicking with an amused rhythm that suggested she was already plotting how to involve him in adventures far beyond anything he could imagine. Kale swallowed, muttered something about bringing a snack, and realized he was standing at the threshold of something that would utterly change the trajectory of his mundane life. The stars outside twinkled, distant and infinite, and Kale, despite the absurdity of his situation, allowed himself a small, incredulous laugh. Somehow, by tripping over a crate, by being clumsy and human in the right moment, he had caught the attention of someone extraordinary. And Lysera, with her long, elegant ears and teasing grin, was only just beginning to show him the vast, improbable and strangely humorous universe waiting for him, beyond the corridors of Vera Prime. Kale woke to a persistent buzzing that he was almost certain wasn't coming from his alarm. After a few groggy moments, he realized it was the ship itself, Lysera's craft, hovering gently just above his bed, or rather, what passed for a bed on a ship designed for someone who didn't need to sleep the way humans did. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and accidentally knocked a small control panel off the bedside console, which beeped indignantly as if scolding him for clumsiness. Lysera was perched on the edge of the opposite module, her long ears twitching in amusement, eyes reflecting the faint starlight streaming through the window. "Good morning, Kale," she said, voice lilting, teasing. "I trust you slept as humans do." Kale blinked at her, then gestured vaguely at the rumpled blanket. "I think I got most of it. I woke up at least 3 times thinking I was floating into the next dimension." He rubbed his neck. "This ship, it hums in ways my brain isn't ready for." Lysera chuckled, a sound that made the gravity of the moment, if one could call it that, feel oddly light. "That is the hum of the quantum conduits. They resonate with probability. You humans notice these things in unusual ways." Kale made a sound somewhere between a groan and a laugh. "Great. I always wanted to annoy the laws of physics before breakfast." Breakfast, as it turned out, was an adventure. Lysera handed him a small, crystalline capsule, nutrient-based sustenance. "It dissolves in water and forms something approximating food." Kale stared at it. "Approximation. Does it taste like chicken at least?" She smirked, ears flicking. "If you close your eyes and imagine very hard, yes." He followed instructions, dropped it into a cup of water, stirred cautiously, and after a tentative sip, grimaced. "Chicken if it were melted and confused." Lysera laughed again. Kale thought that, for the first time in his life, an alien's amusement was more comforting than intimidating. The first mission of the day was simple, according to Lysera. A minor survey of a gravitational anomaly near a small asteroid cluster. Kale's spine stiffened at the word anomaly, but he tried to hide it. "Minor survey," she said, eyes sparkling, "is a relative term. Mostly involving observation and occasionally, if things go wrong, surviving spectacularly. Don't worry, humans are statistically proficient at surviving spectacularly by accident." Kale swallowed and muttered something about wishing survival included a manual. She handed him a small toolkit that looked far more complex than anything he'd ever seen. "These are mostly instructions, some probability enhancers. Think of them as cosmic duct tape." Kale nodded, unsure if he was meant to be impressed or terrified. Probably both. As they left the ship, the zero-gravity corridors gave Kale a fresh set of problems. He floated upward unexpectedly, knocking into a storage rack of maintenance drones. One spun lazily into a nearby console and emitted a shrill, robotic shriek, which Lysera found highly amusing. "You humans really have a way of leaving chaos in your wake," she said, ears twitching. "It is oddly endearing." Kale tried to apologize to the drones, as though mechanical beings could be offended, and ended up tangling himself in a harness that made him look like an awkwardly stuffed sack suspended by straps. "I'm proficient," he said weakly. Lysera laughed, and Kale realized this would be his life from now on, clumsy heroics punctuated by her calm amusement. The asteroid cluster itself was spectacular. Glittering rocks drifted lazily, some with faint bioluminescent veins running through them, as though the universe had spilled a bucket of neon into the void. Lysera guided him through the observations, pointing out variations in gravitational distortion, using terms Kale only half understood. When he tried to ask a question about quantum flux, she tilted her head, ears flicking. "You are not entirely wrong, but humans rarely observe with your enthusiasm. It is appreciated." Kale grinned nervously. "I'll take appreciated as a win, I guess." Then, of course, the anomaly struck. Not catastrophic, just weird. One of the smaller asteroids began orbiting Kale instead of the larger cluster, spinning lazily like a confused planet. Kale's reaction was immediate. He flailed, grabbed a tether that launched him into a slow spin, and accidentally pressed several buttons on Lysera's console. A holographic map of the local space around the asteroid cluster expanded, displaying routes, gravitational fields, and some blinking red indicators Kale assumed were either warnings or insults directed at him personally. Lysera's ears twitched in the most human-like expression of amusement he had ever seen. "You do have a talent for exploration," she said. Kale, spinning in zero gravity, could only laugh. "Yes, I excel at unexpected trajectory management." When they returned to the ship, Kale found a message waiting. A digital sigil, glowing faintly, began to display a string of symbols he didn't recognize. Lysera leaned over his shoulder. Ah, yes, these are invitations, or warnings, or a mix of both. Your actions in saving me have attracted attention. Kale gulped. Attention like fan mail. Lysera's smirk widened. Possibly. But more likely, organizations that keep tabs on emissaries from my world. They are curious why a human intervened. Kale's stomach twisted in a combination of excitement and panic. So, I'm famous, or in trouble. Lysera leaned back, flicking her ears. Both, in equal measure, it is entertaining. Kale's friends. If one could call the maintenance crew who barely noticed his existence friends, would have laughed at the situation. Here he was, a middling repair technician, now apparently a person of interest across galaxies. Lysera guided him through the protocols for interacting with these emissaries. Mostly smile, be awkward. Humans are very good at awkward and it disarms them. Kale, taking notes as though this were a formal training, muttered to himself, smile awkwardly, got it, very disarming. The day ended with Kale staring out into the void again, hands gripping the edge of the observation deck. Stars flickered in distant constellations, and small comets drifted lazily past, while Lysera, floating beside him, flicked her ears in rhythm with a pattern of cosmic energy only she could see. Tomorrow, she said lightly, we leave the station. There is a mission that involves negligible danger and possible excitement. Kale turned to her, blinking. Negligible danger. She smirked, as always. From a human perspective, yes. Mostly manageable with luck, skill, and occasional chaos. You have all three. Well, two, perhaps. Kale laughed, realizing that mostly manageable in Lysera's vocabulary probably meant something entirely different from human, manageable. That night, as Kale lay in the narrow bunk, staring at the starlight filtering through the ship's hull, he felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and terror. His ordinary life, the one where the worst calamity was a broken gravity boot or a spilled cup of synth coffee, had vanished. He was now caught in a current of cosmic events, nudged along by a tall, elegant alien with ears that twitched in amusement at every human mistake. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he made a joke about calling it the most accidental adventure ever. And even in the quiet of his own thoughts, he laughed. Lysera, of course, would have found it hilarious. And Kale, realizing he had no real choice but to follow where she led, allowed himself a small, incredulous smile. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and absurdly humorous, and he was about to discover just how chaotic destiny could be when guided by kindness, curiosity, and one very patient alien with long, elegant ears. Kale floated in the ship's zero-gravity corridor, arms flailing like a wind-up toy gone rogue, while Lysera drifted beside him with an expression that was equal parts amusement and patience. If you continue at this pace, she said, her long ears flicking in what Kale suspected was alien laughter, you may unintentionally collide with the entire ship. That would be impressive in a very human sort of way. Kale groaned. I was just trying to reach the controls without activating a small nuclear event. Lysera raised an eyebrow. And yet here we are, unscathed, which, statistically speaking, is either miraculous or a sign you are meant for interesting things. The craft hummed softly as it slipped through the space between two pulsars, a tunnel of radiant light curving around them like a cosmic river. Kale's stomach did loop-de-loops, not entirely from the gravity shifts, but from the realization that he was here by choice, and that choice had consequences far beyond spilled coffee and botched maintenance work. Lysera guided him to the central control deck, a room filled with glowing consoles, holographic displays, and a faint scent that reminded Kale vaguely of ozone and toasted bread. You've been learning quickly, she said, eyes glittering, but there is a greater reason for bringing you along. Kale shifted nervously. I assume this involves danger, cosmic paperwork, or both. Lysera's ears flicked in a way that suggested amusement. A little of both. Your act of kindness, saving me, has marked you as a human capable of influencing probabilities beyond your understanding. We call this the custodian of chance. Kale blinked. Custodian of what now? She smiled as if explaining the obvious. You have a rare alignment of traits: empathy, honesty, and a talent for chaos. It is these qualities that make your species remarkable in a small yet important way. And therefore, I offer you a choice. Kale swallowed hard. Choice. He shifted from one floating foot to the other. I'm still adjusting to basic survival outside gravity, and now you're offering life-altering choices. Lysera chuckled, ears twitching. Yes, and you may find that even life-altering can be humorous. She gestured at the holographic map of galaxies before them. One path, you remain on your station, return to the life you know. Another, you accompany me, learning to navigate probabilities, making decisions that affect entire systems, all while retaining your humanity. Kale stared. Entire systems, Lysera nodded. Entire systems, and sometimes breakfast choices on a planetary scale. Kale groaned. Great, so I might be responsible for interstellar pancakes. Noted. She guided him through the process of understanding his new role, showing him simulations of improbable events, like comets altering trajectories to avoid planetary collisions, trade convoys arriving on schedule despite sabotage, and even small acts of kindness among alien species that could cascade into major outcomes. Kale's natural awkwardness became an asset. His missteps caused ripple effects that Lysera would have described as beneficially chaotic. Once, he accidentally triggered a minor gravitational pulse, redirecting a cargo asteroid and preventing a collision with a fragile research station. Lysera's ears flicked approvingly. Remarkable. You may need instruction, but your spontaneity is unparalleled. Over the weeks, Kale grew into his role, learning to trust his instincts, humor, and compassion as tools of cosmic significance. Lysera became both mentor and friend, teasing him mercilessly whenever he attempted an overly dramatic human flourish, like attempting to wave both arms in zero gravity, or accidentally sending a communication beacon into a distant nebula. Their camaraderie was punctuated by jokes, minor pranks, and a shared appreciation for improbable coincidences. Kale learned to laugh at himself, to embrace the chaos he could influence, and to see the universe as both vast and mischievous, where a single act of kindness could ripple into wonders unimagined. One day, as they navigated a region where reality seemed to shimmer, an interstellar eddy caused by overlapping worm currents, Kale noticed the subtle ways his decisions now mattered. A shift in a gravity field allowed a lost cargo freighter to dock safely. A single choice redirected a colony transport, avoiding disaster. Lysera observed quietly, ears flicking. You see, Kale, your presence here is not mere chance. It is deliberate, and yet you approach it with laughter, which makes it manageable. Kale grinned, feeling the weight of responsibility tempered by the joy of accomplishment. I suppose if I'm going to accidentally manage the universe, laughing helps. Their journey eventually led them back to Vera Prime, orbiting the station that had seemed so ordinary just weeks ago. Kale floated past familiar corridors with a new sense of purpose, helping minor repairs, sharing a laugh with station workers, and occasionally nudging probability in subtle ways. Preventing a transporter accident here, ensuring a shipment arrived on time there. The station seemed smaller, less imposing, now that he understood his own capacity to influence events, however small, with kindness and ingenuity. In the quiet of the observation deck overlooking the stars again, Kale and Lysera shared a rare moment of calm. "You've changed," she said softly, ears flicking with curiosity. "No longer just a clumsy human. You understand the balance of unpredictability, and yet you remain entirely yourself." Kale laughed. "I've mostly just stopped tripping over everything. Well, sometimes." Lysera tilted her head, amused. "It is precisely your imperfections that make you extraordinary." Kale smiled, realizing that the universe's vastness no longer intimidated him because he had found his place within it, not through power or conquest, but through empathy, humor, and the willingness to act when it mattered. Lysera extended a hand, long, slender fingers catching the light. "Shall we continue?" she asked. Kale took it, feeling a mixture of excitement and reassurance. "Let's," he said, voice steady. "I suppose interstellar pancakes await." She laughed, a sound that mingled with the hum of the ship and the distant glitter of stars. And as they moved forward into new galaxies, new improbable events and adventures that defied expectation, Kale felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His ordinary life had ended, but what had begun was something richer, infinitely unpredictable and wonderfully alive. A life shaped by choice, chance, and the rare courage to be kind. And so Kale, once a clumsy maintenance worker, now a custodian of chance, floated into the stars, his laughter echoing faintly through the corridors of Lysera's ship, marking the start of a destiny that was as vast as the galaxies themselves, guided by compassion, humor, and the elegant, twitching ears of his extraordinary companion.